All right, and we are live. Just let me do my usual thingy here. Share to Facebook. Good afternoon, everyone. I hope all is well with you. Hope you're doing all right. Hope you're taking care of yourself in the middle of this pandemic. You know, we're constantly hearing things happening out there, variants are swirling all around the place. So make sure to take care of yourself, mask up, and wash your hands, do all those different things that we were told before. All right. Welcome back to Dollars and Cents. This is where we talk to you about a whole bunch of things as it pertains to money. We are, a team of individuals who try to bring you valuable information. We're trying to bless our community. We're trying to help our community, educate our community, right? I'm one of the individuals that's on here, KP, also known as Kenton, also known as KP. We have here Keisha Johnson from RT. All right, and we are live. It's all right. We forgive you for that one. RTS Mortgage Financial. Billy Jane is not here. Wade is not here. These are the other two individuals. But, Billy Jane might be on in a little bit. We have here the person that we have been talking with, we have been speaking with for the past few episodes, Counsel Kyle Corbin. The information that he has been dropping on us has been more than valuable, insightful. It's helped in so many ways. It's clarified quite a few things. We've been talking about wills. And so much information, and we're gonna try our best to get him back on here after this episode to clear up and clarify and inform us of some other things. But today we're continuing with the wills, and we're looking at the family, Kyle. That's what we're looking at, right?
Yes. Thank you for that introduction. Thank you very much. It's a pleasure to be here again.
Yes, sir.
Once again, helping to inform communities and help everybody be aware of the tools that they can use to keep their assets and their estates in check.
Yes.
So thank you for that. And yes, I'm in agreement. I wanted to continue touching on some of the family law implications that come into play with regards to wills and estates, and your ability to have control over your financial planning. I think when we think about family law a lot, we understand it might be about, it might not be so much about finance. It might be about dealing with custody. It might be dealing with, moving things around and, uprooting your life. But there are serious financial implications when it comes to different family law situations as well. So I know we did touch on it on the last seminar that we had.
Right.
I'd like to readdress a few things. And I think,
by all means, if you have to go over some things, that's okay.
Definitely.
Yeah, let's refresh a bit. Yeah.
So one of the major concerns really is with respect to remarriage. That can be something that in today's day and age, a lot of people face, and depending on the circumstances of your situation, that can create a complication with the will. Usually means that the new spouse is going to take priority over any family members that you may have had in the will or existing children.
Right.
For that matter. Sorry?
No, I said interesting. Yeah.
You had a question. Okay, yeah, it is interesting because a lot of people don't really understand or think to make those types of changes when they're entering a new relationship, right? And as well, like if you're trying to pass down the effects of your estate, any sizable amounts of money or property, that can be very restricting. So there's a term we use. It's called disinherit, which kind of dislocates you from your inheritance upon a new marriage.
So if let's say if you were married before and you had children, and then you marry again, right? And of course, these children do not belong to the current wife. Now, could it be a situation where the current wife, let's say, she would have control over all those the funds and everything? I'm speaking in terms of the initial children. That is not the current wife. That's not their mother. How does that work? Can they be put
Kyle,
out?
Sorry, so you finish your question, Keisha?
Yeah.
Yeah. I don't. Were you going to clarify the whole concept of disinherit or?
Yeah, and I think that's kind of where Keisha's going.
Okay.
Okay. Sorry. Okay.
Yeah.
Sorry.
Yeah.
I thought you paused there. Okay. Sorry. Yeah.
Yeah. So it has a few implications because I mean, essentially, once you remarry, your new spouse will now have certain rights over the property that the two people are enjoying. So, for example, if there's a home involved, if there's additional assets or finances acquired after the new marriage, and as well as I said, even anything that was there existing before the remarriage. So to answer your question, yeah, that can really affect the way children now are able to deal with the property, especially if they're dependents, which is something we spoke upon on the last seminar.
Right.
So yeah, it can work to disinherit because what ends up happening now is first of all, if we step back a little bit and go to if there's a remarriage, there had to have been a divorce at some point.
Correct.
Right. Yeah. Hopefully. Yeah.
Yes.
That's usually how it works. Yes.
Yeah.
It's usually how it works. Yes. Although it can also happen if one of the spouses passes, you can remarry in that sense.
Right.
But we'll stick it to the divorce for now. So when you enter a divorce or you engage in a divorce from your existing spouse, what ends up happening is that your will is not necessarily doesn't necessarily become null and void. It can still have effect, and your previous spouse who you've now divorced from could still have entitlement to your assets, the way you deal with your estate, depending on how it's worded. And this is why it's very important for your legal professional to understand your situation and be able to navigate these circumstances. For example, if in your will you're referring to spouse, and you divorce and you no longer have a spouse, then those provisions will have no force in effect. But if you have the provisions worded in a way where it's not necessarily applicable to a spouse, it's applicable to an individual as named, that can affect the way your will is dealt with. And that's where the notion of remarriage comes in, because if you don't, for example, draft a new will, which is encourageable when you do enter a new relationship or a new marriage, then you could have a situation where your beneficiaries are you leave a big mess, which is the whole point of a will, trying to avoid that mess upon your passing. So yeah, it's encourageable to create new documents, and again to express these concerns to your legal professional when you're drafting your will.
So, okay, so in terms of what Keisha was saying now, how does that dynamic play out? Like, what does it look like as far as, we hear of messy situations when the will is not there. or children. Some children are saying this, then the other side. I don't know how to phrase it, but just still continuing along the line of the wills and the divorce, the remarriage, and all that.
Yeah, and it's a good question. I mean, there's a variance of situations that could occur. I think the safest thing to do is anytime there's such a significant change in a relationship, one should revise their will.
Okay.
Yes.
All right. Okay.
That's
there we
the
go.
overarching theme.
Yeah.
But the types of situations are so extensive. Any specific you should pay attention to will. But certain examples are where you may have children of one relationship that are expecting to benefit after the passing of both parents under their will. And then there's a remarriage, and that interferes with the dynamic of how that will is administered, because that will is no longer applies to that previous matrimonial situation. It now gets affected by the new marriage and the new rights of the new spouse. So that's a situation where the kids may have concerns to say, okay, well, what's happening? Speaking back to the disinherit principle, what's happening to our estate? What's happening to our entitlements when this occurs, right? So it's definitely not even obviously not just for the person who the will applies to, or who's drafting the will. But there's also other people that may have concerns if they're aware that they may have some kind of entitlement on the will, right?
Right.
So again, the overarching theme is really to one, look at the will and see the wording. Obviously, we have legal professionals that draft the wills, so it may be something that a person reading to just check if it's okay may be elusive to, as to why it's a good idea to have a legal professional go over it. There's even in aspects of separation, it's a little bit different from a divorce. It doesn't necessarily have the effect of invalidating a will or its provisions, but there are certain entitlements to, for example, when somebody separates, there still can be wording in there that could leave entitlement to you who your spouse is, even though you're separated from your spouse, depending on the wording, right? So in for example, it's a little bit different from a divorce. A legal divorce is interpreted differently, but it's still encourageable to, upon separation or the contemplating of separating, to revise your will or to inquire into revising a will, right?
I'm just thinking about a particular situation happening in our world. DMX passed away, and I was reading a report that his spouse, or the lady he was married to, I think 8 years or something like that, she's not getting anything. Or, I mean, oh, wow. Yeah. I mean, granted, I don't know the full details, but I just caught that piece in terms of, you're talking about revising, you're talking about making sure that is in order when things change, right?
Right. Yeah. Hey, looks like we have somebody joining us.
Hey. While Billy Jane just came in, let me take the time just to mention to folks, we have Counsel Kyle Corbin here with us. If you have any questions, you want to shoot it at us, just go ahead, hit us up on YouTube and hit us up on Facebook, and we'll see the questions and we'll pose it to him. And even if you see this later on in the broadcast, you can still send a message and we'll be glad to touch base with you. All right. So welcome, Billy Jane.
With that particular situation there, I mean, they are married, legally married. What would trump that? I always thought once you're married, what would trump that type of situation where the wife ends up with nothing?
Yes, and it's Billy Jane. We're just going into some family. You've come on, welcome. We're just going into some family law implications regarding the will and how that can affect somebody's financial situation, the entitlement of finances.
Such good information.
Yes. So, Keisha, in answering your question, this is actually something I want to touch on a little bit. It starts to go. It's still finance related because these documents, which I'm about to speak about, are they still work to manage assets, finances, and they can even work to manage debt. So again, not only what you own, but what you owe. And that includes what in Canada we call a marriage contract, but many people know as a prenup. We lost Keisha.
Okay, let's keep going. Technology, it's one of those things.
Marriage contract, what we sometimes know as a prenup in the United States, as it's referred to,
Right.
and a cohabitation agreement, which is kind of like a prenup or a marriage contract, but for somebody who's in a common law relationship.
Explain cohabitation, just so just for individuals who may not understand that.
Right. So cohabitation is basically common law. That's when two people are living together with some sense of permanency or attachment to each other.
Right.
And they wish to have an agreement in place because there's no formal marriage in place that would allow the default marriage law to apply to them. Default marriage law meaning how assets are divided, how assets are owned between the two spouses under that marriage. Those rules don't apply to a common law situation. So cohabitation agreement can kind of help guide how those situations are dealt with.
So when you say cohabitation agreement, are you actually talking about a document that is drafted and put together, or it's just something that is understood based on law that when the two people are living together for a while and they have children? Is that what?
Common.
Technically, it can be both.
Okay.
Technically, it can be both in Canada, but essentially, we would hope that a cohabitation agreement would be written.
Okay.
Yes. I would advise everybody who's watching the show now and whoever watches this show, any type of agreement or understanding that you have with anybody, it could be anything, investment, a contract, anything like that should be in writing. So that being said, a cohabitation agreement is something in writing that two people who are in a common law situation can use to deal with, again, finances, assets, liabilities, all that sort of thing. So bringing it back around to Keisha's question in relation to your example, KP, where somebody is married and they could end up resulting with nothing upon somebody's passing is where there may have been some sort of, in DMX's case in the United States, prenup, in Canada, a marriage contract that could have vitiated any entitlement. We don't know. There may have been a will that also spoke to that entitlement, to the negative, as in this case, and didn't allow any entitlement. And again, that could also be, it could go both ways. It could be because there was a will, it could be because there wasn't a will. But more than likely, there was probably some sort of marriage contract or prenup involved there as well.
Okay.
Right.
So that's very interesting because I think a lot of people do think that, you're married and then you have all the rights because you're the spouse. I think a lot of people do believe that the marriage trumps and everything, but you are right. Of course, you have prenup agreements. And so if you were to, of course, be married, but you can also draft up a will where you're saying that the wife or the husband is not entitled to anything. So that would be the prenup, or is that, something different?
Yeah. So that essentially stems from like a marriage contract or prenup, like you're saying, right?
Okay.
That's where the initial entitlement, the foundation of the initial entitlement would come from. But again, it gets into a very complicated situation because it's going to be the wording and all these different factors that come into play to really analyze what the situation is. Nobody's just going to roll over and accept that they're not going to get anything if they truly believe wholeheartedly that they're entitled to something. So I think it kind of runs into our conversation, which we briefly touched on the last seminar that we had, which with respect to a will addresses what's called the equalization payment versus an entitlement under the will. So equalization in the context of family law, as it applies to assets and things you might own or elements of your estate, deals with the dividing of property owned under the marriage between the two parties.
Mm-hmm.
When somebody passes, there is still an equalization entitlement because they it in effect it's like when you're married and your spouse passes, it's almost as if you divorced on the day prior to them passing. That's how the law interprets it. So I'll say that again. So when there's a marriage, if there's the family law applies in terms of how the assets are dealt with, and it interprets a passing of a spouse as if a divorce occurred the day before the person passed. And that's when the equalization comes into play, because that equalization essentially applies to a divorce, right? Mm-hmm. So what ends up happening in respect to a will and how you deal with that if somebody passes and it's characterized as a divorce, and there's also a will that has the entitlements in there, you could come up with a situation where the will might say, there's no entitlement to my spouse. And the equalization says, well, yeah, the law says there's a 50-50 share, so we have to figure that out. In that case, obviously, it's more than likely somebody would choose to elect under the family law and have half of the estate. But there's also the inverse situation where a will can leave 100% of the estate to a spouse. Mm-hmm. And equalization would only permit 50%. And in that situation, a spouse can choose to elect under the will instead to receive a higher payout, or if they, depending on the circumstances, they can choose to elect under the equalization payment as well. So
it's up to the surviving spouse then?
Correct.
On what they want enforced?
It's up to the surviving spouse on what they want enforced if their entitlement is addressed under the will, meaning that they have a choice. So they can choose to entitle under the will, or they can choose to their entitlement under the laws of divorce.
Interesting.
Yes. So it can get, and I think the whole theme here is to really inform and educate. And I'm not expecting, I don't think any of us are expecting for this to be an overall course on exactly what you're supposed to do.
It's putting them on the road. You're just putting them on the road.
That's right.
Exactly. And I think the main point is that there's so many different variables and circumstances that could come at play.
Yeah.
That people should be aware could affect what they're trying to do with their finances and their estate and so on. That it's really important to speak to a professional financial analyst as well as a wills and estates lawyer in regards to what is actually what their intention is.
Yeah, this definitely.
I just want to put that extra plug in there, Kyle. A professional like Kyle Corbin, right? I just want to make that clear. You need to reach out to Kyle Corbin. A lot of times, we hear of wills just generally. We hear of wills, we know of wills, and all the different things that you've spoken about and all these things, right? We don't have the full understanding, the full concept. Some of us have not gone as far as some of the things that you've said. We're just at the basics. So that's why in terms of when you said what you said there, I said, you're just putting us on the road because at least we now have a starting point.
Thank you. That's the intention here.
Mm-hmm.
Exactly. No, it really does attest to the importance of having specialists with you, right? Because everyone's situation is different and the nuances are vast and complex and unique, to each family or each, situation. So, seeing a lawyer or counsel, I think is really advisable. I know a lot of people like to try to, self do it themselves, get their will kit, but all of these nuances, like, I mean, even just talking about, the intersection between family law and your wishes on a will, like, most of us wouldn't even be aware of that, right? And so I think it is
can be challenged.
Exactly. So I think this is wonderful and so grateful that, you're sharing these kind of insights. Like, I'm so curious to know if there have been, I'm always about the stories. Okay. I love hearing the stories. Like, what happened in this particular situation with this family where this wasn't considered, because I used to work for many years within corporate supporting, the trust business. And I would hear stories about, things that went on, about how children, didn't get something, or they got too much, or things were held up for years because of that, like all those kind of things. And I think it's important to, as you share these great insights, like if there's a story that you've actually worked through related to some of these concepts.
Yeah. I mean, gosh, you put me on the spot.
Oh, sorry.
I'm trying to think about one right now, but what I can tell from my experience, it may not be a direct story of an experience, but what I can tell is that the majority of people that really, so I have obviously clients who will come in and say they want to prepare. So they want wills and they want power of attorneys to be drafted, and they want to be educated on how they can go about, fulfilling their wishes once they pass. And then there's the other side where somebody's passed and somebody comes into my office and says, how do we do this? How do we administer the estate? And like I said, it's not a direct story or a situation, but what I do find is I find a lot of individuals don't really understand, which I think we've gathered from our conversation, that don't really understand or may not be aware that there's so many multifaceted avenues that come into play with respect to how an estate is dealt with. So it misses me. I know I have a story somewhere. It's not coming through right now. But there's
Sorry,
many.
that's okay. Because I remember I thought I even heard you mentioning something about DMX. So I was like, what's the story of that? So, because I know I was late to the party. I'm sorry, everyone, family. But yeah, I remember you mentioning DMX. I'm like, oh, what was that?
Right.
Yeah, no, that was me making reference to his wife and the fact he passed away and his wife not getting anything. So granted, I don't know the details of it. She's not in the will or whatever the case. So Kyle was just elaborating on that.
What I can do is I can actually bring a story. It's not a story of my own experience, but it's a story of kind of intertwines with something that happened around Michael Jackson's passings. Now that we're talking about celebrities here, and I remember there was an issue with ownership of royalties when he passed. And this is something that I think could have been, yes, there are implications when somebody's alive in terms of contracts and how that's dealt with, but there's also implications that could have been addressed under a will. And I don't know the particular situation to that depth to speak on it. But for example, if you're in a business situation like Michael Jackson was, and there was royalties to where somebody is able to use your intellectual property or whatever other property you might have, and to continue generating funds from that. And once you pass, there may be a reluctance to continue giving their portion of your royalties or a portion of your revenue from that particular investment. And how is that dealt with? I remember in his particular situation, the family lobbied for to receive royalties or to continue receiving royalties from some of his work that he had done. to which I think one of the record companies had actually claimed outright ownership of once he passed. And that was a situation where I would assume there had to have been the will to be looked at to see, okay, if there was any direction as to where his continued entitlement of revenue from those royalties or intellectual pieces of intellectual property, where they would go. There was, and in this situation, I'll add a little bit of character to it. I mean, a contract with a company in this situation with Michael Jackson could actually, mirror kind of what a marriage contract or cohabitation agreement is, because there's an agreement beforehand that stipulates what is supposed to be dealt with. And in this situation, it would have been a contract for royalties and ownership of intellectual property in Michael Jackson's situation. And what happens with that afterwards, right? So, something like that where it was thought of, it was properly dealt with before somebody's passing. And we all know it was kind of an abrupt passing of somebody who contributed a lot to our world. But the failure to plan is really a plan to fail, as they say sometimes, right? So really looking forward and addressing those issues. I believe, Billie Jane, you did mention on one of our seminars, digital rights and how to pass those down with a will and so on. So that kind of adds to, really understanding the breadth of the things that are going on and how to address those. And and it dawns on me, I do have a story. So I did have a client who, she was an older lady, very nice lady. I actually had a very good time communicating with her. She was declining in health. And what happened was she had actually written a book about her life. It was a biography. She had written it, as I said, she was an older lady, so she's getting up in age, but she had written the book quite some time prior to our interaction. And she had provided for the kind of the proceeds of that book to be diverted to a charity while she was alive, but it wasn't a permanent disposition of those funds. It was just sort of saying, okay, when I get the royalties in, any sales or proceeds, I'll pan them to this charity. And at the time of her passing, once we started at the time of our interaction before her passing, when she was trying to get her will sorted out, she remembered that she had this arrangement that she had already set up for the funds to be directly diverted, and that's why she didn't really, it was something that kind of at the last minute she thought about. And what we ended up having to do kind of at the last minute was, we had to get in contact with the company that, the publishing company to get them to address diverting a rediversion in the event of her passing. And we had to get in contact with the charity who was supposed to receive it. And that ended up being difficult because I believe the charity had renamed and the publisher was
so many things.
Right? So I think that really speaks to, really keeping track of assets and the things that you have. I'm not saying everybody's written a book, but there's things where, something of the sort might come into play that we might not think of.
Yeah.
Right.
Wow.
And it was really a good deed that she wanted to do by, contributing to that charity that she was, it was a sickle cell charity, actually. So it was a very noble thing that she wanted to do. Right. Yeah.
Wow. That's sort of, extending even that conversation about cohabitation, whatever, but, arrangements with other organizations and companies. And even as a business owner, what happens to your business after, this is such a complex conversation. Yeah. And I don't think this can attest any more to the importance of speaking to a professional. And, that's always a question that people have. It's like, okay, it sounds like it makes sense that I should speak to a professional, but what is that ringing me for, right? I don't know. I know even I had a conversation with my dad and he was like, don't they have something for seniors and seniors rates? So, people, it's financial commitment is something that is, you know, of serious consideration to people. So I'd be so curious to know, like, what does that look like in terms of costing when you have a professional help you with that?
Yeah, and it's a very good question. It's a question that requires some honesty, and a question that requires some analysis as well, because it can be variable based on what the breadth of your estate is. Now, I
Right.
understand there's many people who have looked into do-it-yourself will kits, online will services, that sort of thing. That can be very cost minimal. But again, they don't go
Cost you a lot
into.
in the end.
Yes, it costs you a lot in the end because they don't go into some of the situations that we've articulated across the few series that we've been discussing this topic.
Mm-hmm.
So what I'll do is I'll go into a little bit of a breakdown. So I did discuss the power of attorneys at one point, and as well as the wills. A will generally, and I'll be honest with you, you could probably find a variance of fees out there amongst lawyers.
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah.
I think in drafting getting a will properly drafted with a lawyer spending time with you to go over your estate and really help you understand and take the time to help you understand exactly what the implications are. That can range you anywhere from the $500 range up to $1,000 range. And that depends on, again, what the breadth of your estate is. And the power of attorney can cost anywhere for each document from $150 up until even $250, again, depending on the complexity of your document. So you can already at the high end be looking to pay at the most about $1,500 to even closer to $2,000 for a package, which is very expensive for the average individual, and also for somebody who maybe just wants to kind of have some quick security and provide
Mm-hmm.
a few assets, and have some comfort there. So what I normally do is I keep in the range of that $500 to $1,000. I also include a power of attorney document, so a power of attorney for property and a power of attorney for personal care comes with my package for will services.
Nice.
And again, that's within the $500 to $1,000 range, depending on the size of the estate. And why I stress the importance of doing a power of attorney at the same time is because, like I said on previous appearances, people always forget that there's a point of decision making that can be compromised while you're still alive. Health situations, old age, your capacity to understand legal implications, all that sort of stuff that can deteriorate while we're still here. So a power of
Yeah.
attorney taking you through to a will, I think is crucial, and I think that everybody should get both sets of documents. The worst thing is for the arguments to occur while you're still here and then follow through until you're past, right?
Some one person just sent me. I just got a text message. Person asking if the power of attorney costs. Sorry, is his power of attorney cost per person within the marriage?
Can you repeat that question?
Is his power of attorney POA cost per person within the marriage?
Yes, it's essentially per person. However, if it's a marriage situation where both people are trying to address their concerns, I would obviously, and I would hope any other professional out there would try to work out a deal or a bundle package on somebody in that type of situation.
Okay.
I know, and just speaking a little bit more to that type of situation, I understand that there are what we call joint wills. And essentially you could make a joint power of attorney, but I always advise against that because it can get messy, and it adds too much complexity. And I feel like in the event that, let's leave it at that. It adds a little bit too much complexity and it creates a mess. So I always advise people to get their own individual documents, even if they mirror each other is fine, but to do their own individual documents. And that being said, because I encourage that, I always make sure that I address that in my pricing if I'm dealing with anybody that is requesting that.
Okay. So when you say get their own individual documents, what do you mean?
Yeah, so I understood your question. Your question was that if that pricing applies in a marriage where two people they want a power of attorney document. That's how I understood your question. Which would mean that, is it the same price for a husband and a wife or whatever the civil situation is? Two spouses that want power of attorney documents.
Okay.
And my answer was yes, but if that's the situation, I will obviously take that into account because it's kind of like a 2-for-1 type of thing, right? So and in addressing your respect to that it's advisable for each individual, whether they're married or not, to have their own individual document. So own individual power of attorney or own individual will.
Okay. That's okay.
Mhm.
That was huge.
I know that's what.
That was huge. I was just thinking, okay, me and my husband with our joint will, whatever, but we should have our own.
Well, I have actually a story and a few scenarios I can put into how that would take effect.
So just before, Kyle, this might be one of those cliffhanger moments.
Yes.
Right? We have a few minutes to chew.
Yeah.
Right? That was big.
This is perfect. This is a good cliffhanger.
That was big. I didn't, I don't know what I was thinking, but you just turned on another light bulb.
Totally.
Okay, well, I'm glad to be informative. Was there another question that you wanted to carry on before I went into it?
No, I just wanted to point out that was huge, number one, and number two, that
we're on the wire of time.
There are a lot of things turning in my head.
Yeah,
and the time is running out, right? So that's
a quick. Yeah, we have to pick up. We have to try to get that into another session. A quick question you had mentioned with regards to when we're talking about social media, passwords, your phone passwords and stuff, and someone had passed on a daughter, and they weren't able to get into her phone, and you had to I guess reach out to Apple, was it? Were you successful in that? Were you able to get the password for them to eventually get what they needed off of her phone?
Yes, we were. We had to go through a bunch of hoops.
We were
able to.
You were able to. So I want to end on this note, right? He was successful in battling Apple.
Look at that.
not even the government of the United States, I don't think, was successful in that.
Yes, you're right.
So this is someone you definitely want to have in your corner. That's definitely going to go to the battle for you, right? In terms of your wills, your legal matters where family is concerned with the wills. So that's definitely. Want to definitely end on that note. Do you guys have anything else to add as we wrap up? That story, there's something that we want to hear, so we definitely have to cliffhanger that. And 100%.
Definitely.
I just think that is huge.
I mean, to drop you see that huge. He drops it like 2 minutes before we're wrapping up. Like, oh yeah, by the way, you should each have your own will.
Yeah, you don't just say it. You don't just Because
this is the beauty of coming together and having this kind of open dialogue, and just such wisdom gets dropped along the way. And how blessed are we within this community to have access to such expertise, right?
Yeah.
If Kyle is open to making another visit, we'll need to hang on the end of that cliff to find out more.
So what we'll do then, Kyle, is you can throw out some more information regarding the figure, the financial piece, right? You can use a range. You don't have to be specific or whatever the case is. And also that bomb that you dropped, right?
Yes.
The story. Don't forget the story. How can people get in contact with you, Kyle? Let them know how can they reach out to you. Some may not even want to wait for the cliffhanger. They want to get on that phone and say,
"Yeah, I can't wait. We need to resolve this yesterday."
Yeah.
I think
they can't come fast enough.
I think the best way is to give me a call.
Right.
I'd like to post my information on your live stream.
Please do.
Yes, add it to the comments.
Yes, definitely will.
100%.
I'll add that on there, so anybody that needs any help, has any questions, they can reach out to me, and we can move forward.
Awesome. Well, as we know, here we are. We are bringing knowledge and opportunity to those in our community. We want to, keep you in the know. And this is something that's very, very important. We want to make sure that you understand, because there's so many, as we're listening here today, this could go many different ways if it's not done correctly. And as I said before, sometimes we think about doing it, the non-costly way, but in the end, it might actually cost us a lot, not just in the financial aspect of it, but also the emotional aspect of it as well. So we want to make sure that we set up ourselves correctly, and we're happy to have, Kyle here to share, his knowledge, so that we can continue to bring that knowledge to you, of course. Yeah. Anyone else as we wrap it up here?
Nope. I think we did a good job of helping folks making sense of their dollars, right?
Yes.
Totally.
Yeah.
And I just noticed too that, we had a comment from Clive Vaughn. It was so awesome that Clive joined us and was so brave to even put a comment in there. Do you know Clive? He said, "Up top, KP."
Yeah.
So that is so cool. Welcome, Clive, and hoping that you got some great insight from this. And, we'll keep monitoring the comments. Even if you're catching the replay, please continue to engage, because you heard it, that Kyle is willing to come back and relieve us of hanging on the cliff, right? We just got to figure out when that'll happen. But what is so cool is that, you put your questions in there from the replay, and you never know, we'll be able to address those in the next conversation. But most importantly, I think, I'm heeding from this, it's important to get some professional advice. There is a wealth of knowledge here, with Kyle, and I think that it's worth it to explore how you can have a professional walk you through this, because it's so important to your future.
Yes.
I've made the notes, sir. I've made the notes. I know exactly where what we're coming.
Yeah.
Thank you.
All right, folks. Until next time, next Thursday, we'll be back on here, 1 p.m. We are going to be sharing a lot more information with you with Counsel Kyle. Take care of yourselves, all right, and be safe.
Take care, everyone.